Um, I am really delighted to introduce today's speakers. We've got Summer Rosanovsky, who is a Community Outreach Officer at Europe PMC. She delivers training on how to use the platform. And also joining us today is Kate Nyhan, a US-UK Public Health Librarian. Kate is a member of the Campbell Information Retrieval Methods Group, and she also co-founded the Librarian Peer Reviewer database and the non-for-profit organization Community Access to Ventilation Information. Kate is interested in quality and reporting of evidence synthesis, the use of evidence in languages other than English in systematic reviews, and inclusive scholarly communication. Today, we are going to cover the following points. We'll start with a presentation from Summer on content in Europe PMC, as well as Europe PMC search rules and logic. We'll introduce the Europe PMC Advanced search, and then move on to Kate to show us a systematic review use case example using the platform. And then we'll wrap up with the Q&A session. Without further ado, Summer, please take on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maria, for the introduction. So today we're going to be hacking literature searches, building smarter search strategies with Europe PMC Advanced Search. So I will be taking us through the Europe PMC content, database rules, syntax, and advanced search. So Europe PMC is an open database of scientific literature, and it's supported by a coalition of 35 public international funders. They identify Europe PMC as a repository of choice for their funders to meet their open access requirements, and Europe PMC also receives support from the European Molecular Biology Laboratory with a strong technical infrastructure provided by EBI. So what content is in Europe PMC? So Europe PMC is a global life sciences database. It's accessible for free by anyone, anywhere in the world. And it has over 46 million life science records, including all journal article abstracts from PubMed, including Medline, and selected journal article abstracts from Agricola. It also includes nearly 11 million full-text articles from PubMed Central and an additional over 9 million articles where Europe PMC indexes only the abstract. We also provide links to a legal copy of the full text via Unpaywall, which is a legal service that finds copies of articles for you. And Europe PMC also has nearly 1 million abstracts for preprints from 34 platforms, and that includes bioRxiv, medRxiv, and ResearchSquare. Of those preprints, there are over 70,000 preprint full text records. And in addition to this content, Europe PMC also indexes books from the NCBI bookshelf and the biomedical PhD thesis from the Ethos database by the British Library. All the content indexed in Europe PMC, including data from PubMed and PMC, is stored in Europe PMC's independent database, and this is hosted at EBI. So Europe PMC is a mirror of PubMed and PubMed Central. So this means Europe PMC contains all journal article abstracts available in Medline and PubMed, and this content is accessible on PubMed and Europe PMC. Additionally, all PMC full-text articles, except just over 27,000 predating our agreement from July 2006, are also in Europe PMC. And the content from PubMed and PMC is updated daily into Europe PMC. In addition to mirroring PubMed and PMC, it also includes other content such as the preprints, theses, and agricultural publications we discussed. So although Europe PMC mirrors PubMed and PMC, we do have some differing content, which means if you are searching identical written search strings that have been translated for Europe PMC, that's one reason why that content may differ if compared to running that search in PubMed or PMC. Europe PMC is a content aggregator, and it contains articles which are connected to preprints, citations, ORCIDs, open reviews, funding, and data. Europe PMC identifies data citations such as data DOIs or data accessions in the text of articles using text mining. And those data links are available for a number of different databases, including the European Nucleotide Archive, PDBE, PFAM, Interpro, and Ensemble. Europe PMC also links articles that have been curated by databases such as Intact or Flybase, and that's with the corresponding data records. All data pertaining to a study can be found in the data section of the article in Europe PMC. This also enables advanced search options for data-related searches, such as specific searches for certain data sets, data types, or even text-mined annotations, where your annotations are biological terms or relations, such as diseases, gene mutations, chemicals, or protein interactions, and these are highlighted in the text of the abstracts of full text for readers. So that's covered the content that's available in Europe PMC. So what about the search functionality? The search functionality of Europe PMC looks for queries in both the abstract and the full text of articles, if the full text is indexed in Europe PMC. This differs from PubMed, which searches through abstracts, and PMC that searches through the full text. So again, this is another reason that if you were searching identical search strings that were translated for Europe PMC, your result count may differ, and that count may differ from PubMed and PMC. Europe PMC uses a 3 Boolean operators and or a not, where you will search for articles with all the terms you listed if you use and, or for articles that have either of the terms you listed and both, and not will return articles that only contain one search term as long as the other search term is not present. And again, this is within the full text and the abstract. And the default Boolean used by Europe PMC is and. So for example, if you're searching tRNA function and you don't specify the Boolean, it will be and. So it will actually, this is what the search engine is doing in the back. If you enter Boolean terms as free text, avoid mixing or and or not within the same line unless you've grouped these Booleans together or used brackets. Otherwise, your search may not provide the intended results because the search engine does not process the Booleans terms in a sequential order. It processes them nots, then ands and ors. So this means, let's say I want to return articles that use the term physiotherapy or physical therapy, as they're used quite interchangeably, and I want all of the relevant papers on that topic. But I don't want anything related to qualitative for this search. So I put in physiotherapy or physical therapy, not qualitative. The search is actually going to return articles that have physical therapy, not qualitative, and then any article type with physiotherapy in it. So actually, to achieve what you were looking for, you'd need to be using these brackets so that actually you're getting papers that have the term physical therapy or physiotherapy and do not contain qualitative by putting that bracket around the or section there. For your search, you might actually want to search for exact phrase, so something specific. So for the tRNA function, which we saw earlier, it automatically puts that and in. If you use quotation marks, this means that the search will look for it together. So rather than looking for two separate terms, which is what happens if you don't use the quotation marks, if you add them, it looks for it as a phrase. So this means it's looking for the phrase through the full text and the abstract, rather than looking for tRNA anywhere in that text and function anywhere in the text. Without the quotation marks, tRNA could be in the abstract and function could be in the discussion, and actually the paper's not relevant. So do remember to use those quotation marks. Using single quotes in Europe PMC actually acts as if there's no quotes. So if you search tRNA function with a single quote, it's the same as having no quotes there. So you're searching tRNA and function anywhere in the article text, not necessarily adjacent to each other. And the Europe PMC search engine makes some modifications to your key terms. So it is case insensitive. So if you're searching for something capitalized like Mick, it's the same as searching for a lowercase Mick. So this means all the articles with Mick capitalized, lowercase, or a mix of capital and lowercase letters will be returned. The search also does not recognize letter accents. For example, searching for cafe with an acute accent will return articles containing the accent or without the accent. But this can be overridden using the exact search double quotes. So if you put the double quotes around the cafe with the accent, it will only return cafe with the accent, not caf without the accent. Special characters such as dashes are removed and replaced with the default Boolean and, so the terms before and after special characters are actually treated as two separate terms. So if you were looking for C-Mick, Europe PMC will search C and Mick. So this means rather than the search looking for this as one term, it's looking for two separate terms anywhere in the text and not necessarily adjacent to each other. So whilst your intention is to search this as one term, due to the special removal of the character, Europe PMC is actually searching as two terms. So to come around this, you will need to use the quotation marks, and doing that means that it's looking for the phrase, so it looks for it together in the text rather than as two terms. So don't forget your quotation marks. There are also Europe PMC stop words. So if there's common words such as the, an, with, of, in, or, and so on, they're removed. Do remember the Boolean and is capitalized, so that it's recognized as a Boolean. So the role of P53 in Cancer would be role and P53 and Cancer. So it's looking for role and P53 and Cancer anywhere in the text, not necessarily together as a phrase. If you do want to search for that phrase, including one with stop words, you need to use the quotes. So the quotes will find an exact match of the phrase, meaning that it looks for the phrase in the text rather than each term. So your stop words are not removed if you use exact quote marks. And within those, you cannot use the Boolean. So if you put in a capitalized and here, it would act as an and. In Europe PMC, the asterisk character is a wildcard, and this is used for any number of positions. So you can use this operator to search for any word that starts with the base of a word. For example, if you've got a word that starts with neuron, you would also, and you search neuron asterisk, it will search neuron, neuron, neuronal, and so on. But please do note that wildcard usage is limited and not allowed when resulting in too many clauses. For example, if you put a C and then an asterisk, this would return too many searches, so that wouldn't work. And we've discussed how to search for terms anywhere in the text of the articles and for exact phrases, but you can actually search for terms that are beside each other in the text that are near each other. So they don't necessarily have to be together. And to do that, you would use double quotation marks around the terms you'd like in close proximity, and then a tilde symbol and the number, which is how many words away the terms can be. So maybe you work in cancer and you want to find the protein P53 and the drug doxorubicin, but you could put the quotation mark around P53, deoxyribicin, quotation mark, tilde, and then 10. And this will find you all articles where P53 and doxorubicin show up within 10 words of each other, and those articles will be returned. You might want to do this because, for example, in this one, these two terms might not necessarily be beside each other, but in relevant papers, they'd be in close proximity. Europe PMC uses Solr, an open source enterprise search system for document indexing. It uses MongoDB for document retrieval and the Oracle database for document storage. And the search engine does not automatically add synonyms, alternative spellings, or alternative forms of words. So rather, it works transparently, searching only for what you input. There is also no specific character limit for search queries. The query size is limited only by the internet's browser's own limit. So now I want to quickly introduce you to the newly redesigned advanced search that's been designed around the needs of the users of Europe PMC. So here's our design that's been created with you in mind. So let's dive into this a little bit. So the advanced search has been designed so that you don't need to remember the specific syntax of Europe PMC. So you need to open up this free text box, and then there's a free text search, and you can search for keywords, key phrases within the article sections, enter a single word or a phrase in the box. It lets you select where you want to search that. The all fields and full text is highlighted by default, and this search is within all key article metadata fields, including the title, abstract, author, affiliation, etc., plus the full text when it's available. And this tends to expand the number of results you would have and is the same as the default search in Europe PMC using that main search bar. You can also choose to select the title or the abstract, or use the drop down for a full list of all the sections you can search within, such as your introduction, methods, discussions, figure legends, and supplementary materials. Do note, if you go to select any of these to do that search, such as the title, anything in the drop-down box, the field or the drop-down boxes there, when you select those, all fields and full text is automatically deselected for you. And you can select multiple places to search using the options here or the title and abstract as well, so that you can adjust the search to exactly where you need it to be. And there is also a box here if you'd like to run an exact match, which will automatically add quotation marks for you. If you add them yourself, it will automatically tick this box. So whichever way you prefer to work, it works with you. Once you have your first line of query ready, you then need to select Start Building My Query. Your query will appear at the bottom of the screen, as you can see here. I searched for the exact phrase tRNA in the results or the supplementary files, and to the right-hand side, there's a cross to delete the query line entirely or an edit button to edit the query. And if you decide to edit your query, then it will have a little pop-up box that pops like this, and you can only edit the terms and if it has quotes to be an exact match or not. Please do note if you want to edit the places it's searching, the sections, so for example in the supplementary or not, you would need to have a new query line to do that. So that would be where we began earlier. Also, you may have noticed to the very far right or hand side, the query line gives you a number, and this is the search results for that query line. So this particular query is bringing back 115 results. So let's say I also decide to add and cancer, and that's in all fields and full text. You can now see that the search query line for and cancer itself is over 5 million. And then at the bottom right, you can also see the total for the query of a whole. So for the total query, there's 27 results. This helps you see which lines of the queries are narrowing, expanding your results, and supports you in creating powerful and effective search queries. And if you want to export this query to save it for later, maybe you want to translate it to another repository or share it, you can do so by clicking the export button above the full query. And the export is in a text file like this. And finally, I'd like to show you some of the other expandable search options in the advanced search, so you can use it to find the relevant research. So you can search for articles that have biological text mine terms in the text, for example, diseases, gene-disease relationship. Do note if you do use this one, it will also limit the results to articles with the licensing that allows text mining. And these annotations show in the abstract and the full text, but it will be something that limits that search based on the licenses. You can also search for articles that have data record links. For example, key BI for chemicals, metabolites, or metabolites for metabolomic experiments. So you can get a range of data there from different sources so that you're limiting that research to those record links. Another useful section is where the date, publication type, or ID, where you can search by your date type, for example, the first date it was published or the first date it was indexed in Europe PMC. And you can also set your date range. You can also search for specific publication types, so that includes your journal articles, preprints, books and documents, review articles. Also, you can find retracted journal articles and withdrawn or removed preprints. And you can also search by ID type, so you can use a DOI, a PMID, a PMC ID, a Europe PMC preprint ID, an ISSN, or an ISBN, and you can search by those also. Advanced search also allows you to easily limit your search to free full text articles only, and you can also search by specific open access license types and by funding agencies or grant IDs. And in the final section of advanced search is the author affiliation or journal, where you can limit your search by author or ORCID, so you can use their name or their ORCID ID, the affiliation or journal. And all of these advanced search sections can be used in conjunction to build complex search queries to meet your search needs. They give you the power to effectively and quickly create complex search queries. So I'd like to thank you all for listening to this introduction to Europe PMC's advanced search, and hand over to Kate Nyhan, who will now give us a demonstration on how she uses Europe PMC advanced search.
Thank you. Really glad to be here. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A period with everyone because I can see from the questions and comments that are already in that Q&A forum that it will be a productive discussion. So I just put a link into the chat with my slide deck, which you're welcome to explore. Oh, hang on, let's share my screen first. Okay, so I'm Kate Nyhan. I'm the public health librarian at Yale, but I'm not speaking on behalf of Yale today. I'm just a librarian who uses Europe PMC quite a lot and finds it a really useful tool. Now, the warning here is that if I tell you something that doesn't match what you hear from Summer or the rest of the Europe PMC team who are on the call, you should trust them. You should not trust me. They're the voice of the experts here. So I started to be a Europe PMC super fan at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the first reason why I got into this resource was that I wanted to be able to do some searches, could be expert searches, comprehensive searches for evidence synthesis, and it could also be for day-to-day answering of reference questions. I wanted to be able to have good coverage of preprints. And at first I thought, well, okay, bioRxiv, medRxiv, what else do I need? But thanks to the work of Bianca Kramer and Nicholas Fraser, I discovered people were putting, and are putting even now, preprints about COVID-19 in particular and medicine in general. They were putting them all over the internet, all kinds of different preprint servers. And the idea of trying to search all of them, update something every day or set up some kind of ingestion process to get metadata from all these different sources that you see in this pretty but intimidating figure, that would have been a real challenge. So when I discovered that Europe PMC ingested content from many preprint servers, I thought I've got to familiarize myself with this tool. And then as I got into some of the details, I discovered there were some really valuable features for my work in evidence synthesis. Not only the preprint servers, but other gray literature content that is not available in PubMed. It has the key features I need: Boolean operators, nesting, field tags, structured export. I can live without having a wildcard that I can type in, but these features are available, and that's my baseline. And there's some productivity increasing tools too, like alerts or rerunning a search from a URL that are really convenient. The fact that some of the content can be searched in full text is very useful for me. The kinds of public health driven research questions that I am working on often involve some concepts that I want to search for that other authors might have considered to be not so important: an effect modifier, a secondary outcome. So that feature is nice. Limited as it is by the availability of full text in Europe PMC. And this last point, I can't say enough about how responsive and helpful the Europe PMC help desk is. In fact, I think that was the start of my relationship that eventually led to user testing, and then doing this talk was asking a lot of questions. So thank you very much, Europe PMC Help Desk. Now, the preprint servers that are indexed in this platform, I'll just let you take a quick look here. Right, there are a lot of preprint servers that are at least sending publication metadata and abstracts, and then related to the pandemic or at the instigation of funders, full text may be available too. Now, in terms of searching, some of this will recap what you've heard from Summer in a moment ago. But from the expert searching perspective, or for comprehensive searching, I'd point out that these three different field tags are available. Having a combined title abstract field tag saves me a lot of characters. I have not run into character limit problems since the introduction of this, or maybe since my discovery of it. It's not actually required to have a parenthesis before and after the term. You could just say title colon term one. But I find it's really useful to put in those parentheses all the time. And this is the reason why. If you have a query like this one here on the left, where I don't have parentheses in this spot, then Europe PMC will fairly rationally process this as if I want the word cat in the title. But if we're talking about the word feline, then the title, the abstract, the full text, if Europe PMC has it, the author affiliations, the whole record. And so you see there's quite a lot of records that do not have either cat or feline in the title, but they do have feline somewhere in the record, 40,000 of these. So to avoid making to avoid forgetting to add the parentheses when I actually need them, I use them all the time, even if I just have a single term for now, because I expect that I may come back and add in some additional or statements as I develop my query. I will also point out that the abstract field that you can access through title_abs, that seems to include mesh terms, although without explosion. And here's the reason why that's my understanding. So in this query, I've got some title terms also connected with or some abstract terms. And then in this chunk here, any medical librarians might recognize some phrases that are not typically used in natural language in the title or the abstract, but are part of mesh labeling that you would have in PubMed. And frail elderly, I suppose that might be used in natural language sometimes, but and if you do a little test, note first that for this query, I've got 1.5 million results. If I take out these things here, oops, let me try that again. If I take out the terms that I was searching within the title abstract field of Europe PMC, but that we recognize them as words that frequently appear in PubMed records as mesh terms, if I take that out and I leave the rest and then I rerun the search, now I've got less than 500,000 records. So clearly, including some mesh terms in the title abstract field of my Europe PMC search was giving me a pretty comprehensive retrieval there. But you may also note, if you are a very eagle-eyed person with good eyesight, that although this concept that I seem to be searching for is about older adults, and if I were searching in a bibliographic database with subject indexing with mesh terms, I would probably have used the subject heading aged. But in this case, I didn't use aged. I just used some of the more narrower subject headings that are available in that ontology, because I do not want to retrieve everything where the word aged is present in the abstract. So there are some challenges about trying to port or translate a search with controlled vocabulary directly, but this is the compromise that I make. Now, you might wonder, is it actually useful to have both a title field and an abstract field and a combined field? And I do find myself sometimes using the abstract only field in examples like this, where I look for the word older and the word adult with truncation in the title field, or in the abstract field, I am interested in the set phrase with quotation marks, older adult, or the set phrase with the plural noun, older adults, also in quotation marks. So why do I do that? Uh, because I don't have options about adjacency searching. I want to be a little flexible when I'm looking at the title. If it has the word older and it has the word adult, even if it's not the exact phrase, quotation mark, older space, adult, exactly as is, I might be interested. And so when this query here is the search that you saw in the slide, and then a not statement, and then this second half of the search statement is about older adult or older adults as exact phrases instead of the and statement we have over here that I just marked. And as you could predict, the result is I get some articles where the word older and the word adult are both present in the title, but they are interrupted by some other word, right? Older US adults, older Puerto Rican adults, older or vulnerable adults. So this is a hacky approach to the absence of a adjacency command. I would hesitate to take this query and put it into the abstract field because an abstract can have a lot of text. I might have older and adult in two separate paragraphs, but this is a compromise that I like. So having the option to search for a particular term in the title and another version of that term in the abstract is a nice feature of Europe PMC that helps me tweak it helps me balance sensitivity and specificity. Okay, I encourage you to be careful if you do those full text searches because without a field tag, the query will run in the data, the full text when Europe PMC has that, and also the metadata, including author affiliations. So not only will that get you results you did not expect, but if you ever use a not operator, the not no field tag term could throw the baby out with the proverbial bathwater. So be careful there. That said, the full text searching is great if I'm looking for a concept that might be hidden away there. I like to do a sort of test like you see in this screenshot here. If I'm thinking about using a full text search or the individual sections of full text search, I want to start off by finding out, well, in this topic area, how much full text does Europe PMC actually have? So I will start with a query that does not involve the full text, like this query here. And then I'll look on the results page at the number of results total and the number of results which have full text in Europe PMC. That is the number of results that I'll be, the universe that I'll be working within if I do some queries that require a particular term or set of terms to show up in the full text or in the method section or the discussion section or some portion. So the ratio of this number to this number is really key when I'm deciding, is it reasonable in this particular circumstance to use some full text searching. And of course, it's not just about the ratio, which in this case is 77%. You might also want to check, what about the very recent papers? Are a lot of them behind a moving wall before Europe PMC inclusion as a result of the previous NIH public access policy or other funder policies that have a moving wall? So you just want to be thoughtful when you use this full text searching. Also, and I would be thrilled to be corrected on this point by our Europe PMC friends, as far as I know, if you are searching without a field tag, you're searching the article full text if it's available, and you're also searching these metadata fields like affiliation. But sometimes I'd like to search the full text without the affiliation or the text of the conflict of interest statement and so forth. So that's a question that we can ask our experts in a moment. Okay, phrase searching. You heard from Summer about the importance of quotation marks. I'll tell you, curly quotation marks are fine. So if you're the kind of person who likes to create your searches in a Word document, no big problem here. Um, and I find that the issue, and Summer mentioned this, but it's so important, I want to highlight it too. This issue here, that words or phrases with hyphens require quotation marks. Let's just demonstrate. Yes, it really is true, because if you search for pre-exposure without the quotation marks, you will retrieve papers like this one, pre-stress exposure, or early life exposure in preschool children, and so forth. So yes, those quotation marks really are important. If you're used to Ovid Medline, for example, this will be a change that you have to get used to. And you can truncate, but you can't truncate in phrases, so you have to write things out. Okay, limiting by record source. When I first heard that Europe PMC has the content of Agricola from the US National Agricultural Library, I was thrilled, because Agricola or the National Agricultural Library has gone from a lexical search of a particular database of the old-fashioned nature that we're all used to as expert searchers. And now they have a discovery layer, which I am finding it a little hard to get used to. And so I thought, great, lexical searching, Boolean operators, nesting, RAS export, all the features that I really like, but available through Europe PMC as a platform. However, if you do this source limit, and I think that that's not available through the advanced search interface. I think that it has to be entered with this kind of typing. If you do a source limit for Agricola, for this query, right, older adults, singular or plural, in the title, I get a very small number of results. But if I do the same query, those two phrases in the title only of Agricola, either through Ovid or through the discovery layer on the National Agricultural Library website, I get a lot more results. So while you may well want to click through to this list of available sources about the UK dissertations and so forth, you would want to do a little checking before you rely on Europe PMC as a platform to access some of these other databases if you're expecting to get 100% coverage. Okay, now actual searching and making these summations. So when I'm doing a comprehensive search, I like to go line by line or concept by concept. But although there's a search history that you can see in Europe PMC, as far as I'm aware, it's not possible to make line number references as you might be used to in PubMed or Ovid or Cochrane or some other databases. So I like to keep track of things in a separate document, and then I paste the giant query into the search box. I might take these individual queries and look at them in the advanced search interface, because I think that part of the advanced search interface where you can see the number of results for each line that's part of a larger query is really interesting. But I find it really important to be able to look at this and check that all of my parentheses and nesting are working appropriately. And in this example, you can see that the parentheses, particular these two here, are actually really important for the overall logic of the search if I want to see the overlap of these three concepts that you see listed on the left. In particular, I need to have these two parentheses because I've been a little fancy. Some people might say needlessly complex, up to you. When I am doing a query for this older adults part that has one element in the title field one element in the abstract field and some other elements in the title or abstract field. And that's one giant or that has at least one and built inside it. So then that whole thing here is one chunk. And then I've got two other title abstract chunks. And note, I need the quotation marks when I have a hyphen in a word, and I need to have quotation marks in the singular and plural form when I have a multi-word phrase here. So I would, and I've got this live right here. So I could do some testing with these individual chunks, or I can copy the whole thing. And let's open up another Europe PMC window in here, and I'll paste it in. And because I've gone line by line when I was preparing for this, I'm confident that I would be happy with this. Now, I may want to go back and add some additional terms inside the appropriate parentheses, but I'm happy with this search. I can copy the URL. And if anyone let me just put it in the chat so anyone who wants to rerun it can have the joy of it yourself. That brings us to, oh, before I talk about managing the search results, just a few more tidbits. Let's see. I saved my search as a whole chunk, and I saved the URL. Very convenient. No need to authenticate to rerun it. I really like that feature. Be careful about validating a search against known articles. That's a typical part of the evidence synthesis workflow. But I've seen some cases where an article is indeed available in Europe PMC, and I can use it for validation if I search for it by title or by PMC ID, but searching by PM ID, PubMed ID, doesn't bring up that article. I guess the Europe PMC metadata in that one case, at least, maybe more, I don't know, did not include the PubMed ID. So if you typically use PubMed IDs for validation in Ovid Medline or PubMed or maybe Embase, you might have to change your workflow a little. The character limits, I have not run into that problem once I started being able to combine my title abstract searches. I would really hesitate about using any hedges that were designed for other bibliographic databases, especially if they leverage controlled vocabulary, hierarchical controlled vocabulary in particular, or if they leverage publication types to the extent that you can search for some mesh terms in the Europe PMC title abstract field and so forth. But why not just do that in PubMed or Medline or Embase and then take advantage of Europe PMC for the content it has that other databases do not have? And some points about the topic metadata in Europe PMC and annotations. Honestly, these are more questions, so I'm going to skip over the slide, and if the Q&A is too boring, we can come back to it. Finally, the results page. That free full text filter section here with two sources of free full text. I love that. Of course, in evidence synthesis searching, we're not going to filter our results based on the availability of free full text, but it's nice to have. You can filter for preprints on the results page, or you can just type and source preprint into your query, and that limit will be reflected in the URL. So if you use that as part of your search documentation, you don't have to give a separate instruction to the reader to click here after you run the search. It's all built in. That's really nice. The export feature, I mostly use the RAS export, but the spreadsheet format could be useful. And in this example, you see I've got a spreadsheet with lots of results from Europe PMC. And then in the sources area, I've just made a quick little pivot table so I can see that for that particular query, most of the content was from PubMed, was available in PubMed. There are some preprints. I don't know how many of them would have been included in PubMed already because they're NIH funded, and how many came from other funders or preprint servers that PubMed doesn't engage with. And then there are, in this case, a couple additional sources whose records are showing up in my search results. And this information is not displayed on the results page, but it's very easy to download a CSV and make a quick pivot table to see what kind of stuff you're getting. And finally, I like the fact that I can sign into Europe PMC with my ORCID to save my searches or alerts that way, although I do also save by copy and pasting the URL and the search term itself for my notes long term, just in case I have problems with access. So thank you for my whirlwind tour of my expert searching Europe PMC workflow. I invite you to use the slide deck to get in touch with me on social media or to contact me by email. And now, Q&A.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Summer. That was definitely a whirlwind of information. And we've had already some questions in the Q&A. Just before I jump to the questions, 2 points to raise. I will paste a link in the chat now to a feedback form that we ask you to fill out. The feedback form is for this webinar, just for us to know if we covered the right topics and in the right depth, and so on. So I'll remind everyone at the end as well. And then we also have 2 more Europe PMC team members on the call, Lynn and Rajat, both of whom have been involved in building the advanced search interface. So perhaps some of the questions you've seen them answering, or they may answer other things. Looking at the Q&A, I know there have already been some answered ones. Can we answer a couple live from the ones remaining, and then we can also together look through the answered ones if there are any, additional points. And equally, please feel free to raise your hand if you'd just like to talk through your question instead. And maybe easier one from Paul: how frequently are preprint records indexed in Europe PMC?
Yeah, so I can take this one. So Europe PMC preprint records are updated daily, and for the full text ones, they're either updated daily or weekly, depending on the server that they come from.
Thanks, Summer. Before we jump to the REST API, there's also a question around PubMed potentially being affected or compromised, and how that would impact your PMC and search results. And so, Summer, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so as far from our colleagues at PubMed, we've not heard that anything will be changing at PubMed that we've heard from them. And currently, where Europe PMC acts as a mirror, when we pull in the content, we update this daily. And when we get that content, we then have our own copy of that is on the Emble EBI server, where that's saved there. I hope that helps to clarify that. We also have a blog with an FAQ around this to give some more information. So I'll add that link into the chat into the Q&A as well.
All right, and then we've got a question around the REST API, but it's actually related to a previously answered question around character limit to run searches in Europe PMC. So Lynn has already shared that basically the character limit is intrinsic to the browser that you're using, and therefore the API is a sort of a workaround, and the request is to show an example of how to run a long search in the API and then possibly export the results to a reference manager. I don't know, Summer or Rajat, if either of you can highlight that.
I think that covers it all, Maria.
All right. I mean, I think in terms of an example with the REST API, this is basically where if you have coding experience, you would then, you would have to write a piece of code to actually get the results in the format that you need. It does, spit them out. Like we could show how the API works because we do provide a sort of visual interface to the API where you could see sort of the logic of it and how to build a query. But the results that you would get would be in JSON or XML format, which I don't think are directly usable with a reference manager. So, you know, I would imagine that going to an API is probably more of a suggestion if you know how to code, and then otherwise you probably have to split your query if your query is too long and you're looking for ways to manage that, and you are still limited by the browser, then you would probably need to split it in some way. I should have said that we were answering that live. Hopefully that covers it, but please do ping us if there is more. Again, we've got some questions that are in the Q&A that have been answered, but if there's more like clarifications that you guys would like, let us know. I also wanted to get back to a point that Kate raised around Agricola and limited search results that you get. So one of the important things to keep in mind is that for some content sources in Europe PMC, we actually have selected the content. So it is not all of Agricola. It is abstracts that are categorized as life science related. And so there is, you know, science around maybe soil chemistry or something that just hasn't fallen under the categories that we pick. Similar with, for example, UK PhD thesis, we limit by the topic. So again, it will be the same situation. If you were searching directly in the database, you might have more results for things like interdisciplinary studies or something that was classified as maybe physics, but is somehow sort of related to life sciences. So this is kind of where it comes in. Lynn.
Thanks, Maria. Yeah, Rajat and I just wanted to make sure we had answers for everyone, so we started answering. And there were a lot of questions about adjacency, and I gave a wrong answer at one point, which I've clarified, but because the adjacency search requires the double quotes, there are rules around the double quotes, and we're not really, I haven't investigated PubMed enough to know how PubMed does it, but our adjacency search requires double quotes. And so that means it's looking for an exact match within a certain range of words. So while things that don't work with double quotes, like wildcards and Boolean terms, will not work with the adjacency search either, because it's within those double quotes.
And just to say, in part, some of the features like this are enabled by the search engine that we're using, but they haven't necessarily been set up specifically to support some of these workflows. And so collecting information like this helps us in the future to sort of build and tailor it to exactly what you would want to do with it. All right, we've got another question around wildcards. Can wildcards be used within or before strings of letters, or only at the end of a string?
They can be used within, yes. Are you going to answer that one, Maria?
And I mean, we're answering it live, so as long as yeah. All right. Another point that I wanted to raise, in part prompted by Kate's discovery that not every PMC ID had a PMED. If you ever find yourself in a situation where something's not quite as you would expect, but you're not sure why, please do get in touch with our help desk. I mean, sometimes there are gaps in data or incorrect metadata due to various issues, you know, that may be on publisher side, PubMed side, Europe PMC side, any kind of point in the transfer mechanism. And if you point that out, we may actually be able to fix it. So don't also just say, okay, well, that, you know, that way doesn't work. It might be that it works and it's just an outlier that we need to fix. And it's really helpful when people do get in touch. All right.
Yep. I just wanted to talk through one of the points for one of the questions that Lynn's very kindly answered in the chat. So one of the questions was, if you search for calf in double quotes where you don't have an accent on it with the quotations, will it still find the calf with the accent? No, it won't. So if you use cafe with the accent in the quotes, it won't find calf without it. And if you do the vice versa, where you're searching for calf in the quotations, it will not find the one with the accent on it. So the quotations mean that the accents are recognized. If you don't use the quotations, they're not recognized. So it will return both if you use the accent or not. And the question that then follows up to say, is that the same for antibacterial, which has a hyphen? Hyphens are dealt not the way accents are, they're dealt as special characters. And because it's dealt as a special character, Europe PMC ignores it. So what's happening to that is it essentially treats it then as two terms. So it'd be anti and bacterial. Because it's in quotes, it will look for both of them. So it will actually return, so because it's in quotes, it will look for it as one phrase. So the quotes here are what's really important, because without the quotes, you're going to find anti and bacterial anywhere in that text. If they're together, it will search it as a phrase. So it will return to you results for antibacterial where it has the hyphen or without it.
All right, thank you. I believe there are two more questions in the Q&A. I think Rajat is going to respond to the expert limit one. And then, well, Rajat, if you can just do that directly in the Q&A bit. The other question is, Kate mentioned that she uses your PMC for preprints. Kate, would you recommend it as an extra source for a great literature search if someone is doing systematic review?
Yes.
Thank you, Kate.
And Kate, I think when you were speaking, you asked a question about how to search Europe PMC without, when you just want to look in the full text without all the extras. One way I would suggest doing this is in the advanced search, but you would have to, when you get to the field sections, just select all the full text ones there. Lynn, do you know if there's a more effective, efficient way to do that than what I've suggested?
I'm sorry, was it looking within the full text?
So just within the full text without kind of looking in author affiliations and those extra parts that we...
Yeah, there should, I don't think it's in there yet, but we are including two new fields, keywords and the syntax for the keyword field is keyword : and also there's a field for the full text. It's called body. So body : is how you would do it. So we will be including both of those fields in the section search. So they will be available, or you can just type them in if you want to. They will be available in the next month or so.
Thank you, Lynn. I hope that helps Kate and everyone else that's trying to do that.
Definitely.
We've got a mention in the chat around proximity search, saying there's still some confusion in whether we have a help page around that. Does anyone want to answer that?
We don't currently have anything. We are creating a help page. It's never been publicized that we have this proximity search. And but it is available in Solar, and we're creating a help page that does have that information. It'll be on the new syntax guide page.
Yeah. All right. We also have a question pertaining to the previous answer. Is it already possible to type terms in the body and keyword fields and get results now? And the answer is yes. The only thing I would also say with keywords is it's an amalgamate of mesh terms and authors or publisher supplied keywords. So you have to be, yeah, Lynn, sorry.
Isn't that the KW field?
Oh, yes, apologies. Keyword is the full, so the correct syntax for that would be KW. The keyword will be a section of the full text. So this will be similar to, say, introduction or methods. Some articles will have a keyword section. I mean, it will have a similar effect, but it will only limit it to full text ones. So with that, we're at the end of the hour. Thank you so much, everyone.